Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we're 1 week away from the start of Eagles training camp at the NovaCare Complex. We're going to get into the newcomers today, the free agent signings and the draft picks of 2022 that we are most excited to see on the field next week. Plus, LeSean McCoy and Asante Samuel had some funny things to say about the Dream Team in 2011. We'll get into all that and more on this edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Tuesday edition of the show. It's episode 2 this week of 5. Download it into your phone wherever you get the podcast, free and available on all platforms, as well as on YouTube and Twitter at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DBASI. LOE. Gino, we're 1 week away from training camp, man. We've made it. The dead zone is over, and it's time to start talking about some real football, man. I cannot wait. We're going to get into some newcomers today and really continue these previews.
I just got a freshman assistant coaching position at the school.
Yeah, you're Coach Camilleri now.
For.
I got to start calling you coach on the show.
No, please don't do that. But the head coach today of the varsity team had a great quote. He said, Big 12, they had their media days the other day. SEC, it's coming up. NFL, they're going back for training camps. He says, this is football season. He says, If you have a girlfriend, break up with her because football is your girlfriend now. And that's what I'm glad that my fiance understands that and pushed me into getting into what I love. And it is that time of year, man. We're going to get into it. Week 0 of college football is going to be here before we know it. Training camps are going to kick off. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to be playing preseason games in about a month or so. And then they have a regular season game against the Detroit Lions to really set the tone of what could be a very competitive and a very good season in Philadelphia in 2022 by multiple standards. Can your quarterback take the next step? Can your head coach get this team that has all the weapons on track? Can all of those additions that were brought in live up to the excitement that we have made them be in the offseason over the last 6 months that we've had, where it's really put the stuff on paper, get excited about it on paper, but once the paper falls off and they put the pads on, that's really when you figure out who can play and who can't.
Yeah, and Gino, that's always looking back throughout the years when Eagles training camp started. One of my favorite parts is just seeing the new guys in the first time in, a midnight green helmet and really dressed up for the first time, seeing them hit the field, the Eagles. I know we've gotten a taste of that already in OTAs, but I just remember even though it was a disaster the Dream Team year, seeing Nnamdi Asomugha and DRC and Eagles jerseys, and, even going back to when Carson Wentz was first drafted in 2016, seeing A.J. Brown next week is going to be so exciting. And all these newcomers, you got a little taste for it in OTAs, but to really see and hear about, training camp is really when the first real stories start to come out and you see how everything's beginning to gel. That's when the season really, truly does start, where the spotlight is really under this team. That's always that's always been one of my favorite parts of the start of training camp. And, I think A.J. Brown is the guy that is the most exciting to see hit the field for the first time next week. Just to see overall, how this team starts to use him across the formation, how he's going to gel with Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Quez Watkins. And I know I said, last week we did our stat predictions show, and we both agreed, actually, that we think Devontae Smith might actually post better numbers than Brown this year. But just to see how Brown starts to make his presence known next week, we've already seen it as a leader and, throughout OTAs, what he's talked about and seeing the impact. We know this is an elite receiver, but to see how he's going to open things up for this team in so many different ways, the way he's going to eat over the middle, which is such a key place for Jalen Hurts that he needs to develop, and how it's going to get easier matchups for everybody else that I mentioned. I just am so excited to see a guy that, honestly, man, when you talk about physical abilities with the combination of physicality, size, speed, the football IQ, and the technician he is, honestly, somebody that put together, you've had Harold Carmichael and Terrell Owens that kind of comp to that. He's a special talent that we finally get to see, really in detail starting next week how they're going to use him with everybody else to complement this offense. And that's the part I'm most excited for.
If you had to take all of the acquisitions in this offseason,
yeah,
if you've ever seen a concert poster or a festival lineup where they put all the acts on there, the biggest name on there would easily be A.J. Brown, and then everybody gets tinier underneath that. Not just because of the name, but because of what he is going to do to this football team. Because now with training camps how they are, you don't get these long periods of 11 on 11 going out and hitting the pads. You're more 7 on 7 where it's more spacing based. Your corners got to be stickier in coverage. Everybody has to be a little tighter in coverage. The wide receivers are going to be in those one-on-one matchups that you always see the Eagles Twitter account tweet out. He's going to make the best defensive player that you have in the secondary better. He's going to make your other 1B wide receiver better to want to play up to that level, because Devontae is no pushover. He's not going to say, oh, AJ's here, I know I'm the number 2. The guy came from Alabama. He comes from the Nick Saban tree. He didn't shy away from that competition where they had 4 first-round picks in that lineup.
Yep.
He is going to only evolve his play, which will only make Quez Watkins want to get better. And it all stems from adding good football players, because when you're out there and you see how much better somebody can be than you, and this is in any facet of life. You see a Ferrari driving down the street, right, Lou? You're going to glance over and say, how'd that guy get that, right? Like, oh, how did A.J. Brown get so good with his hands? How did he get so good in and out of his breaks? Well, they're going to talk about that. They're going to teach each other different things. And that's what bringing in a type of player like that at any position, where they're young, they're willing to continue to grow, and you can kind of mold him and the offense around these guys for years to come, where if the quarterback situation, we hope it works out. If it does not, well, the next guy to run this whole show, well, we've built the offense to the strengths of these players as well, because you don't just build to your quarterback, you build to the 11 guys out there. It's not the NBA where one guy can just run the show. You have to play to the strengths of all of these guys. A.J. Brown doesn't have many weaknesses. Devontae Smith doesn't have many weaknesses. Dallas Goedert doesn't have many either. Either does the offensive line. The playbook is going to be open as big as ever, as maybe that we've seen.
He can do everything. And that's the thing is, like, you're going to see A.J. Brown on the outside, one-on-one at the X position. You're going to see him, with the screen game and pre-snap motion. Yeah, the backfield. Like, A.J. Brown is a player that, like I said, Devontae Smith is one of the most complete receivers already. I think you're going to see that in year 2 in the NFL. But, again, just the blend of his actual physical attributes, the size, the speed, the physicality, and then you put on the field his ability to separate. I think that's very underrated with A.J. Brown's game. But I think, again, the part that I'm most excited for, because of one of the key areas of weakness for Jalen Hurts in 2021 was just the fact that there was no presence over the middle for the passing game. And Brown on the outside with Devontae Smith is going to help Dallas Goedert eat in the middle. But A.J. Brown himself, I went back and watched a YouTube video today. It was every career touchdown of A.J. Brown. And, Gino, I couldn't tell you how many of them were through play-action passes. It's a play-action heavy concept of the Titans passing game. It was built around Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. That big 3 in Tennessee is why they were so good for the last 3 years. And so many of these touchdowns were just A.J. Brown winning a physical one-on-one matchup inside. He's so good at maintaining his speed in those tight areas, making a tough catch, breaking a tackle, and his separation ability in the middle of the field, the run after the catch ability in those plays where he took it to the house. I can't tell you how many of those I watched earlier today. I think that is an exciting part because, again, that's a key area that, Hurts needs to develop more. And when you have a guy like A.J. Brown in those areas, your eyes are going to go naturally to those spots more. And I just think he's going to be huge for that part of his development. And, overall, like you said, he's just a star. You just want to see how he blends in with this offense.
And Jalen Hurts, we know in the beginning of the season and towards the middle as well, he definitely did struggle in the middle, but we have to give him some praise towards the end of the season where you started to see him let his progressions open up, and that play where Devontae Smith comes across the middle
I agree.
He's willing to hit him. But at the same time, bringing in somebody that is such a threat to know that I could put this ball in an area where maybe it looks like he's covered. One, his hands are like he has stickum on him. The
His
guy
hand
has
strength
incredible
in
hand.
contact is amazing.
He's going to go up and get the ball. He's going to then make a play with it because he's going to be able to get off of that tackle, if not 2 tackles. And 3, we talk about that home run hitter aspect, Lou. You look at A.J. Brown, you look at the plays he makes, where are his eyes going immediately when he brings that ball in? They're getting upfield. Get the confidence just to put the ball in the middle of the field so it opens it up for the rest of the guys. Because you want to see Quez Watkins or Kenny Gainwell come underneath on those short slant routes, get them the ball in space. Well, you're going to have confidence to get that ball in those tight areas because the linebackers in this division are going to be able to cover guys like that.
Yeah.
But let's open up the field for everybody else by utilizing all the field. Because if they know where you're going to target, that being the outside, well, what are they going to do? They're going to make you throw inside. Well, if you have all of this at your disposal due to having multiple different receivers with multiple different faceted styles to their game, well, then it makes the Eagles even that much more
absolutely
going into next year.
And that's why I'm really excited overall, just not see A.J. Brown, but all these newcomers that they signed through free agency this offseason and through the draft. They present different skill sets that you really didn't have on both sides of the football, and it's going to change the way this team definitely does look. And that's why I'm excited to see it all come together starting next Tuesday, and we'll continue to get into that more coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. But guys, first, a shout out to one of our sponsors of the show, and it's with Dave. Level with me here, Eagles fans. We've all been in this situation before where at some point in our lives, we're a little tight on cash, and maybe you could only afford to put a few gallons of gas in your tank, or you've got another save the date and you're wondering how you're going to afford a gift. Gino's had a bunch of weddings I've seen him go to this year.
We're sending out our save the dates.
Yeah, you got the save the dates coming
funny
up.
That you said that.
That's right. And that's where Dave can help. If you're living paycheck to paycheck right now or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses do come up. Now Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Hindsight is 20/20 and you can't change the past, but what if you could get a little help from your future self? Maybe you'd ask to borrow a little cash, and now you can with Dave. It's a banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on those important bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest, no credit check needed, and millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download the Dave app and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the app from the App Store right now. It's Dave, D-A-V-E. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Future you is going to thank you with Dave. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back into this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri, and we thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast. It's all the news across the league in under 30 minutes. And right now, throughout the week, we've had our special going on the show where we take a look at the 50 most valuable players across the NFL based on the betting lines that these players affect the most from our odds makers at BetOnline. It's available all throughout the week, wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On NFL, all podcast platforms. It's available as well as on YouTube. On today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we've been getting into, Gino, how excited we are about the newcomers as Eagles players hit the field at NovaCare Complex starting next Tuesday. We're 1 week away. And of course, the most anticipated player to see is A.J. Brown, just because of the elite level he's played at since being drafted in 2019 and what he's going to do for this offense, the positive effects on Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, the versatility he has. But overall, I'm just really excited to see how so many of these different newcomers blend in because they present so many different skill sets. And you want to see, like, how are they going to use A.J. Brown with Devontae Smith? How often is Devontae going to play inside? And A.J. Brown and Quez Watkins? And like you mentioned, are they going to use him in the backfield? And what kind of impact does he have on Jalen Hurts? Are they going to throw the football that much more this year because they want to get Brown the football? And then you've got guys like on defense, man, Haason Reddick. They didn't have a full-time player like that last year. They used Jannard Avery in that role a little bit here and there, but you didn't have a player to really utilize that kind of strong side linebacker that's primarily a pass rusher, but he can play in space as well. And then Jordan Davis, right? I mean, you didn't have that kind of player either. There's just so many difference makers you brought in that are everything there's just so much weight on them being key to these schemes on both sides of the football. That's why it's so exciting. And I trust this coaching staff and locker room with the chemistry to make it all gel, unlike past years, like, the dream team, which we'll get into later.
I can't wait for the first Eagles beat reporter to tweet out the first rotation when the Eagles go into a 5-man front. Where they say Jordan Davis is playing the zero tech sitting at nose. Then you have Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave playing as 4 eyes or 3 techs. And then you have outside of the tackles, Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat. Because instantly everybody gets excited at that tweet. We've all seen it. We're all, these are the starters. These are the guys that are going to be out there at starting. Well, not technically, because the Eagles defense, they're going to rotate a ton of guys in there. But what you want to see is the versatility that they are all going to bring. Because you're going to see that tweet, and then a couple minutes later, you'll see a follow-up tweet that says, they're in a 4-man front. They got only 1 linebacker out there, and they got 3 safeties in the back.
Yeah,
in the back.
Right.
Because
right.
they're just – it's going to be much more open, much more fluid, a bigger rotation. Because towards the end of the year, it started to just be Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave in the middle. Brandon Graham's out for the year. You only have Josh Sweat. You didn't have that many bodies, which this Eagles team has gotten by. It's been 6, 7, 8 guys. Super Bowl year. Think about that. Think about the Hassan Ridgeways of the world. Do you remember who blocked the Cody Parkey field goal against the Chicago Bears, Lou?
Trayvon Hester.
Trayvon Hester, a rotational interior defensive
double
lineman.
doink hero. The underrated double doink hero that people forget actually did hit that football.
Just a fingertip. That's all it took to get
That's
that
all it
one
takes,
and get
man.
the Eagles
That's all
to
we
the next round. And continuing on of my little tweet talk here, a couple minutes after that tweet, you'll see their third unit come in, and it's Milton Williams, and you got guys like Patrick Johnson and Teron Jackson and all of the youth taking snaps, but it's all because of the guys that they brought in. They brought in Haason Reddick so they could drop Patrick Johnson down, and he doesn't have to be a starter, which he got starting minutes towards the end of last year. Milton Williams can now come in and learn to continue to thrive in that 3-tech position because Jordan Davis is there to allow Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave to play their natural positions. Like A.J. Brown makes it easier for everybody to play on offense, Haason Reddick, Jordan Davis especially, he makes everybody's job easier. He's going to take up 2 guys, and everybody else is going to have a one-on-one battle on the field. And if they have enough guys that are very good to elite or even good enough to get by and hide in this defense, which has top caliber players, Lou, you're going to see them shutting teams down way more than they did last year. You're not going to see them allow 31 points to Tampa Bay. Especially with this defense now, I don't see that same result occurring that would have happened last year if they had this defense in mind.
Well, and that's the most interesting part is so much of how the success, especially on the defensive side of the football, has to do with newcomers like Jordan Davis, like Haason Reddick, like I think Kazir White and Nakobe Dean. And that's the thing, like offensively, right now, you do have a lot of continuity. There's only one real new starter, you'd say, in A.J. Brown, right? I mean, right guard's going to be different because you head into the season without Brandon Brooks like you did last year. And, Isaac Seumalo might be there, but he's been a guy that started the majority of the time since he was drafted in the 3rd round in 2016, or Jack Driscoll, who they're used to. And, we've talked about how important that is for Jalen Hurts to have that consistency. And finally, he's playing in the same offensive system for 2 years in a row. But you look at on defense, there's a lot that's changed, right? You have a new boundary corner on the outside in James Bradbury. You're going to have a brand new safety rotation with Jaquiski Tart, more snaps for Marcus Epps. Of course, Anthony Harris is back, but maybe a bigger role for Kavon Wallace. As you mentioned, Jordan Davis, Haason Reddick as well. 2 brand new starting linebackers, I'd imagined, if it is Kazir White and Nakobe Dean like we expect. So there's a lot put together. And we've seen that a lot in past years, right? We saw that in 2011. We saw that in 2015. But, unlike those years, it just feels like this is more of a well thought out plan. That's not just this, cluster, this mess of talent that they just threw together. And it didn't really feel like there was a plan. And a former offensive line coach in Juan Castillo is the one putting it all together. It just felt like a nightmare from the start. Whereas this makes sense, right? It's a collection of some great talent, but talent that makes sense for what the coaches want to do schematically. And I think that's the key. And also, though, this coaching staff doesn't hold back this team really from adding any kind of talent, right? There's no. It doesn't. Well, the coaching staff is making sure the front office isn't held back from acquiring any kind of talent, and the front office is making sure the coaching staff isn't held back because they're getting players that the coaching staff also envisions as part of their future. So it's that complement right now that I think is working really well, because the coaching staff proved last year with players that really didn't fit their philosophy as much that they could still make the most out of what they had with more talented players. We have more talented players right now that don't really fit our scheme. Well, we're going to do what's best for them. And that's why the team got better in the second half. So I think that complementary style right now is why I think this is going to work out way better than those past years where there was a lot of change, especially on the defensive side of the football. We'd like to interrupt this edition of Locked On Eagles for a We'd like to interrupt this edition of Locked On Eagles to shout out one of our sponsors of the day, and it's the most tasting protein bar in all the land. It's Built Bar. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have now given you a coconut brownie chunk Puffs bar. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness, but stop drooling and listen. They're good for you too. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and they're all so delicious. Coconut brownie chunk puffs are only here for a limited time, so make sure you head over to Built.com now to make sure you don't miss out on the new flavor. They're going to go fast because they taste absolutely amazing. All Built Bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. All of the flavor of that delicious candy bar that you normally go to. You know, you need a little something sweet after that salty dinner, but there's none of the guilt. The best part about Built Puffs is, of course, they taste amazing, but you can enjoy them guilt-free because, again, they're actually good for you. Delicious coconut, rich sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing and get to Built.com today to order your box of coconut brownie chunk bars at Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. It's LOCKED15 at Built.com to get 15% off your order of the best tasting protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. It's Built Bar. I'm going to dive into one right after this.
That's a great point. And yes, it is going to look different from Jonathan Gannon's perspective, from Nick Sirianni's perspective, but we can't look at that in a bad light, because what it's going to do, it's going to take the good facets of what they had last year when they go back and self-scout. What did we do well? Well, we did X, Y, and Z. Well, what did we do bad? Well, we did X, Y, and Z. So what do we do to get better in those areas? We go and identify personnel to add into those areas to now make our weakness a strength. So what does that do? It opens up the playbook. And on both sides of the ball, we talk about building, not just for now, but building in the vision of the guys that you have there. And even if Jonathan Gannon, let's say, gets offered a head coaching position within the next 2 years, which is very feasible at the rate that he probably will continue to upward trajectory into a spot because of these players, it's going to go hand in hand. The next defensive coordinator who comes in still has all of these toys that are all very versatile.
And they're not one-dimensional, man. Like Jordan Davis is not, although some people, the narrative during the draft was that this is your traditional nose tackle that's going to be taken off the field on third down and pass rushing situations. That's not the case. Haason Reddick is a modern-day player that should fit really in any defense, right? So I agree. Yeah, it fits what Gannon wants schematically, but overall, again, this coaching staff didn't hold back the front office from just taking the best talent overall that can really gel.
Draft good players, and it doesn't matter who you're.
Like, I think Jordan Davis would have fit just fine in Jim Schwartz's defense as the other defensive tackle next to Fletcher Cox. I mean, it wouldn't have fit perfectly, but he's a good enough player where it could have worked.
I'll take. Yes, let's not give Jim that much credit.
No, I'm just saying overall, I'm giving Jordan Davis the credit, saying he could fit in that kind of defense too. He's that talented.
Yes. Yeah, he is a force multiplier, as Ben Solak, former host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, now at Ringer, put it in the article when he wrote up about Jordan Davis and just how the league hasn't seen this unicorn type of player. Because if you put this guy in and you can't figure out what to do, and this is the one thing that since I've gotten to scouting that has really grinded my gears, when it's always, what is his position? He's a positionless player. I don't care what a player's position is. Isaiah Simmons, for example, down in Arizona, right, Lou? I don't care what the guy plays. Whatever label you want to put on him on the football field because he's going to make a difference. You want to call Jordan Davis a nose tackle, a defensive tackle, an interior defensive lineman, a unicorn, whatever you want to call him. It's not going to stop the fact that he could take up two guys, get upfield, open up the run game, or open up the ability for your linebackers to crash in on the run game, hit their holes, keep contained in the middle, let everything bounce outside, and allow everybody else to eat. He opens up so much just because of the player that he is. And if your coach hinders his ability to do so, much like any other position, you go and find somebody else that has to do it. And I don't believe the coaches right now are in a position where they would have to go find somebody else. I firmly believe the Eagles have two coordinators in Shane Steichen, in Jonathan Gannon, that are on the same page with Nick Sirianni, who will now take a more 30,000-foot view role and see the weak points of his team and take that step back where he can say, okay, week to week, we need to work here, right, where he was more involved strictly with the offense last year. Nick Sirianni is very good situationally, as we saw last year in different spots. There were still some question marks, but for a young coach to allow his coordinators to do what they do best, he believes in Steichen, he believes in Gannon, the personnel, the people in charge, the front office. Like all those seasons you talked about, Lou, you look back at them, there was one of those areas that was weak, right? It was either they didn't have the right personnel, the coaching staff hindered them, the front office had a terrible draft. Can you say any of those things going into 2022?
No.
I can't.
And you look at 2011, Gino, that was just such a nightmare in that exact way where it's like the front office was doing one thing and the coaching staff was doing the other. And again,
and the personnel stunk.
Right.
So.
And you don't want to be like we like about this defense is that they're taking players that make sense for the coaching staff, but you don't want to be a team that's like, oh, we can't take player X in the draft because they might be way better than anybody else right now and they could be a star, but they don't fit what we do. You don't want to strap yourself on the board for sure, but you also want it to work schematically too. So you have to have that balance. And when you look back at like 2011, it just wasn't the case at all. I mean, they were playing different. It felt like coverages on one side of the field versus the other with Nnamdi Asomugha and Asante Samuel. And again,
what about Byron Maxwell?
Byron Maxwell
didn't play that scheme at all.
Exactly. In 2015, and Chip Kelly was like, we're going to be a 3-4 defense. Yeah, I know we have Brandon Graham and Vinny Curry. Doesn't matter.
Stand up.
It was ridiculous. Linebacker. Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous. And Brandon Graham made it work because he's, that good of a player and a veteran. And ironically, he turned his career around during that time. But it wasn't because of the schematic fit.
Billy Davis.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. So I just think they're a great cohesive unit right now on defense. And it's funny, Gino, wrapping up the show, I was listening to the podcast the other day, I Am Athlete with Brandon Marshall and Adam Pac-Man Jones. And LeSean McCoy's been a co-host lately now too. And I love Shady on the show now because he's just spilling Eagles content.
Lives up to his nickname.
Yeah, man. Behind the scenes, Shady. Yeah. Behind the scenes Eagles content from 2009 to 2014. And you know me, I love that kind of content. I live for it. And so they were dishing on Asante Samuel was with them on the podcast yesterday. And they talked about the 2011 Dream Team and how they knew Nnamdi was overrated and this might not go well. When I guess the first practice one-on-ones, Nnamdi Asomugha got, completely roasted by Brent Selleck. But then apparently Clay Harbor tweeted out a couple hours later when that video started trending on Twitter, around Eagles Twitter, talking about the Dream Team, that Clay Harbor said it was actually him, which makes it even worse. It's just funny how apparently the players thought from the start this could be a disaster, and it was just that. Man, they should have stopped at trading for DRC, kept your boy Hacilio Hansen in the slot, and went forward. But they brought in Nnamdi, and he was getting roasted apparently by backup tight ends who are now stars in The Bachelor, or used to be.
First off, shout out Asante Samuel. Dude still looks like he can suit up. I still think he could go out there and match up man-to-man with a lot.
And his DNA passed down to his kid, who's going to be amazing in year 2 for LA.
But you look at that team, and I think our episode, you could take a lot away. You signed Nnamdi Asomugha, you bought the Ferrari, you bought the Rolls Royce, whatever your preferred maker model of car is that you so aspire for. They had it. It was in their garage, right? Well, then they open up the garage, they open up the hood, and come to find out the engine's put together with rubber bands and tape. They didn't have the true guys that fit what they needed. To make a Ferrari go, you need a big engine. You need an elite, powerful force to make a vehicle go that finely tuned. Well, if you have a mechanic who skipped every day at Ferrari class, and you buy it from a used Ferrari dealer who all of a sudden he shuts down his business a couple weeks later, and the guy making decisions for you that was the person in charge of putting you in that Ferrari was also a shyster. Well, 2011 was exactly that. Nobody knew what they were doing. The personnel didn't fit the coaching staff. The coaching staff didn't know how to coach
the
up
coaching
the
staff didn't know what they wanted because they didn't know how to coach defense because they were coaching the offensive line.
and they got duped. Like the guy who bought the used Ferrari and he takes it home and the engine is put together with duct tape and rubber bands.
Isn't it funny, too, who they fired for Juan Castillo was Sean McDermott, who now is one of the best head coaches in the NFL. What a nightmare.
We got to do, I don't know when we have just one episode to do the butterfly effect.
We still have to do that episode. Absolutely.
Years ago to get us to that. Like, what if Juan Castillo never gets hired? And Sean McDermott turns into the best defensive coordinator, and Andy Reid.
It's one of Andy Reid's
and
really just
All-Pro in Philly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's the funny part. There wasn't even any good moments in Nnamdi. He was so bad, so fast. Like the minute he came to Philadelphia, which is crazy because before that it was him and Darrelle Revis were seen as the two best corners in the NFL. But I need Shady McCoy to stay on that podcast because I need this 2009 to 2014 Eagles content continuing. But we'll continue to get your Eagles content all throughout the week, each and every day right here on Locked On Eagles as training camp is right around the corner starting next Tuesday at the NovaCare Complex. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Eagles wherever you get the show. Also on YouTube and on Twitter. Hit us up at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase, LOE, and at GC24_football. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast. All the news across the league in under 30 minutes. For my co-host, Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for downloading and listening. And let's go, Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.